They say beauty opens doors. But for me, it opened mouths, whispers that curled like smoke behind my back, judgments that clung to me like my own shadow, curses spat under breath as I walked by. I was the fire in every man's eye, and the thorn in every woman's heart. They said I smiled too much, laughed too loudly, walked like I owned the earth beneath my feet. But they didn't know. I smiled to hide the ache. I laughed to silence the silence inside me. I walked like that because no one ever taught me how to be held. I once stood at the center of every man's desire and every woman's warning. They ate my food by day and crept into my room by night. They promised love in secret, but in public. They spoke of me like a disease. And when my belly began to swell, not one came forward. Not one. They looked at me not as a mother, but as proof of their shame, and that day. That very day. The village turned its back on me. Doors closed. Eyes rolled. Even the earth beneath my feet seemed to grow cold. But if they had looked closer, if they had truly seen, they would have known. This is not a story of shame. This is not a tale of downfall. This is the story of how a woman, broken by the world, rebuilt herself from ash. This is a story of strength, of fire, of rebirth. Our village was not loud, but it heard everything. Even footsteps had meaning here. Even silence was judged. It was a place where honor sat higher than truth, where women whispered more with their eyes than with their tongues. And once your name entered the air, it was no longer yours to protect. They called me the best cook in the village. Said no one could turn palm oil and pepper into magic like chica. And yet, I never ate from my own joy. I fed them with hands that shook when I was alone. I smiled with lips that knew more sorrow than song. I had no mother to warn me, no father to cover me. Just my hands, my hips, my smile. And the choices I made when the nights grew cold and the heart wanted something to lean on. They only saw the flame, not the ashes behind it. They praised my food, but feared my freedom, behind the scent of egusi and jollof rice. Behind the laughter and coins was a silence. A heavy, aching silence that followed me home like a ghost. I wasn't just a food seller. I was a girl with a secret. A secret carved from loneliness. And one decision. One. That would change everything. Tell me, can a village love a woman only for what she gives, and still hate her for what she becomes? I was 27. No mother to guide my hands. No father to silence the rumors. Just me, and this face. This cursed, beautiful face that brought me coins. And shame, they saw me and forgot themselves. Young men with quick hands and older men with slow lies. They called me confident. Free. Temptation in human form. But what they didn't know was how tired I was of pretending that their attention didn't cut me open. They came like night storms, fast, loud, and gone before morning. Each one thinking he was the only one. But I was not theirs. They were mine. For a moment. Then nothing more. Village woman, they whispered, she thinks her beauty will raise a child? Beauty does not boil yam, young man, it can't be mine. I barely touched her. Just once. And not even fully. They wanted me. They used me. Now they vanish. Like the wind in dry season. Not one man stood. Not one name given. Only silence. Only shame, but from that silence came her. Kamsi. Born into whispers. Born with eyes that didn't blink at the world, but studied it. She didn't cry loud. She watched. Like she already knew the weight of this life, and somehow, just knowing she was mine, made everything else feel small. So tell me, when they label a woman broken, can the child she birthed still carry light? In the marketplace, eyes followed me, whispers rose like smoke. No one spoke to me. No one smiled at me. It started with a glance. Then 2. Then 10. Soon, every corner of the village had a story about my belly, except the truth. I thought maybe. Just one. One man would say, yes, I was there. One man would place a name to my child. But the men who once begged me for a taste of soup and skin now wore fear like perfume. I stood in the village square before the elders, with my belly round beneath my wrapper, while the women leaders pointed an accusing finger. An elderly woman shouted, "A child with no father is a curse. She must not join us again." They banned me from their meetings, their prayers, their laughter. I became a ghost in daylight. My stall stood untouched. Even those who once owed me coin now owed me nothing, not even kindness. Another market woman said loudly, "A woman who doesn't know the father of her child? What else can she be but a disgrace?" A group of men stood outside a palm wine hut, avoiding my gaze. One mutters under his breath, "We all tasted." But none of us chewed. I walked home barefoot in the mud, my wrapper soaked, I hands on my belly protectively. I was pregnant, hungry, unseen. And yet, it was not the hunger that broke me. It was the silence. The kind that wraps around your ears and tells you that you are no longer part of the living, but they made a mistake. A great one. They stripped me of dignity, yes. But they forgot, I was still alive. And where there is breath, there is choice. Thunder cracked. I gripped my stomach. I was sweating on my forehead. But I laid down on the mat alone. That night, under the crying sky, I gave birth. Alone. No midwives. No prayers. No herbs. Just me. And the war inside my body. And when she cried, it wasn't just for milk. It was for justice. For truth. For the space they refused to give me. They wanted me buried in shame. But I had just birthed a future. When a seed is rejected by the soil, it learns to dig deeper. That is what I became, soil for my daughter. Even when the land refused me, every name they called me, I turned into a proverb she would grow by. When they mocked me, I turned it into melody. I had no husband. No help. Just a child, and pain that taught me how to build a home with 2 hands and 1 heart. They said I was unfit. I became focused. They said my child would be wild. I raised her wise. They said we'd never matter. So I made sure she would never forget what does. Kamsi was good at school. She answered questions confidently. Teachers nodded in approval. I sold food no one would touch, just to buy books everyone else had for free. I cleaned gutters, carried firewood, scrubbed floors, not for survival, but for her future. Kamsi won many award. One day she came home crying. She held my hands after being mocked by her classmates. "Mama, they say I don't have a father. That I come from nothing." I held her face firmly. "You come from me. And I gave everything. You are not nothing. You are everything I never had." There were days I had no food. But I always had a story. I fed Kamsi not just with yams and soup, but with parables, wisdom, and warnings, drawn from wounds I dared not show. I told her, "You are not the product of my mistakes. You are the result of my choice to rise." While the children of the women who cast me out mocked her on the way to the stream, I braided her hair and said, "Walk tall, my daughter." They laugh because they see your crown before they see your face. I taught her to speak softly, but carry truth in her voice. I taught her to read, not just books, but people. And I taught her silence, not as submission, but as power. She studied by candlelight while others slept under woven bedsheets. She memorized the laws of the land before she ever braided a wrapper. And when she asked why the village children called her bastard, I knelt and whispered, "They only say that because they do not know their own fathers either, but pretend they do." By 15, she was winning debates in competitions that the village never knew existed. By 20, her name echoed in universities beyond the rivers. She wore confidence like the wrapper I never could afford, and carried ambition with the grace of a gazelle. And the day she passed law school, I sat at the back of that hall, the only woman without gelly or gold, but with tears in my eyes and a fire in my chest. Because my daughter, my so-called mistake, was now a maker of justice. Kamsi became a lawyer, her eyes full of purpose. She stood and spoke in court confidently. The same mouths that once called me cursed now call her counselor. The same streets that once turned their backs on me now rise when she passes. The village elders watched the news where Kamsi was being interviewed as one of the youngest lawyers in the region. A successful one at that. One of them said, "Is that Chika's child?" Another elder woman replied, "Yes. The one we said wouldn't amount to anything." Then came the moment I never dreamed of. The governor's convoy arrived. Not for politics. Not for donations. Ah. Guess who came for my child's hand in marriage? One of the youngest governor in the country. How Kamsi met him and how the relationship worked out I don't know. But their wedding was grand, their relationship was perfect. In traditional attire, I stood beside my daughter with my head high, my silence powerful, and when Kamsi stepped out in white, crowned with elegance and law, the same villagers who crossed the road to avoid me now stretched their necks just to catch a glimpse of the girl they once called the cursed child. They came with gifts, with songs, with apologies masked as laughter. Some said, "We always knew she would make us proud." Others said, "We were only protecting tradition." But I knew the truth. What they spat out, they now wanted a taste of. And what they threw away, they could no longer afford to ignore. My name, once muttered with disgust in the market square, became a point of honor. Women who once hid their sons now sent their daughters to ask me for advice. Men who once whispered in corners now greeted me with bowed heads and guilty smiles. But I needed no throne to feel powerful. My throne was every sleepless night, every spoon of soup I denied myself so she could eat, every insult I swallowed to keep her dreams alive. And now, every salute she receives, every courtroom she walks into, every law she rewrites, that is my redemption. I was once the girl who stood in the sun, belly swollen, eyes dry, heartbroken, as the whole village turned their backs. But now, I am the mother of the woman who commands the very rooms that once banned us. I did not survive for revenge. I survived for her. And she became everything I was denied. She became the wind that shook the silence off this village. She became my justice. My joy. My voice. I walked alone through the village after the wedding. Villagers nodded and greeted me with respect. A market woman bowed her head as I passed. I am not the woman they remember. I am the mother they could never become. The fire they tried to smother became the light that led my daughter home. My shame became my strength. My silence became my weapon. And in the end, I learned, reputation fades, but resilience never dies. They thought shame was a seed they'd planted in me. But what they never realized is that was the soil. Rich with pain, watered by rejection, kissed by the sun of my own tears. I didn't just carry a child, I carried purpose. People talk They always will. First they whispered, then they shouted. And when I didn't break, they fell silent. Silence. That dangerous space where guilt hides, and shame grows its roots. They say a woman must carry her past like a shadow. But I carried mine like a torch, burning enough to light the path for my daughter. I became the warning they told their sons about. But also the wisdom they denied their daughters. When Kamsi stood before them in the courtroom, when she took the governor's hand in marriage, when they said her name with pride. None of them remembered the night I gave birth on a mud floor, alone, bleeding, praying the baby would cry. But I remembered, and I remember now. How quick the world is to punish a woman for surviving the things no one prepared her for. They said I was unclean. But there was no dirt in raising a child with nothing but love and my bare hands. They said my daughter would be wild. But she grew with focus, with truth, with a mother who taught her that the world owes her nothing, and that dignity is not given. It is chosen, do you see now? That the ones who cast stones always have the most to hide? That shame only survives when we accept it? That silence isn't peace, it's prison. I do not hate them. No. I leave that to rot in the past. But I do not need their forgiveness either. Because what they meant to bury me in became the soil that raised a queen. Look around you. Even today. Single mothers, abandoned, blamed, questioned. While men walk free of the responsibility they planted. Society forgets that hardship does not poison the fruit, it refines it. Let them talk. Let them judge. But let them remember. Some of the world's brightest lights come from the darkest places. And even a cracked pot can pour life into something greater. This is not just my story. It is the story of many. Of the forgotten. The laughed at. The outcast. But if you are listening, then remember this: your past does not chain your child's future. Your dignity does not need permission. And your worth? It was never up for debate. Now, I turn to you, watching from far beyond my village gates. What would you have done? If you were me? If the world rejected you, spat your name like sour palm wine, would you still raise your head? Would you still raise a child with hope in your chest and no hand to hold? Tell me, what lesson did my life whisper to your soul today? Was it that strength wears no crown? Or that silence can raise warriors? Let your voice speak where mine once cracked. And also, be careful with the decisions or path you choose in life so you don't make mistakes like I did. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let your words become part of the story. And if my tale stirred something inside you, like, subscribe, and walk with us through more folktales rooted in pain, wisdom, and truth, because stories are not just to entertain. They are to awaken. To remind us that even from shame, beauty can bloom. And from rejection comes resilience.